I'm Jesse. I'm Jesse with Living Free Community Foods, and we're privileged today to be at the Bellevue Grange here in Ashland, Oregon. And I'm here with Raymond Seidler. Is that how you pronounce it? With Raymond Seidler. And we're going to talk about genetically modified foods. Raymond, could you tell us a little about your backgrounds and experience and qualifications?
Okay. I've had a split career. Spent about half of my career as a professor of microbiology at Oregon State University. And mid-career I changed to join the Federal Environmental Protection Agency research laboratory and became a senior scientist in the biosafety program for genetically engineered organisms. I wrote actually the research plan that the federal EPA accepted and put into motion to develop testing methods for evaluating the safety of these new products. And I headed the research program to put all of that, all of those investigations into motion.
Well, that's a very, very powerful background indeed, and I'm very, very impressed. And we are here today as a starting point. We would like to discuss a very special article, a controversial article that appeared in the May 15th issue of the Wall Street Journal this year, and it's by Henry Miller. Henry Miller happens to be a fellow of the Hoover Institute at Stanford University. And he's written an article which gave me pause for thought. And the title of the article is that organic foods are not sustainable. And he gives many, many learned reasons for this, which are rather questionable indeed from my point of view. But the punchline of his article is when he discusses genetically modified foods. So what I'd like to do, it is so eloquent indeed, I'd like to read that and to see. According to Mr. Miller, perhaps, and I'm quoting now, perhaps the most illogical and the least sustainable aspect of organic farming is the long-term exclusion of genetically modified organisms. But only those that were modified with the most precise and predictable techniques such as gene splicing. Except for wild berries and wild mushrooms, virtually all the fruits, vegetables, and grains in our diet have been genetically improved by one technique or another, often through what are called Y crosses, which move genes from one species or genus to another in ways that do not occur in nature. Therefore, the exclusion from organic agriculture of organisms simply because, exclusion from organic agriculture of organisms simply because they were crafted with modern, superior techniques makes no sense. It also denies consumers of organic goods, nutritionally improved foods such as oils with enhanced levels of omega-3 fatty acids. So, Raymond, if I might ask you, what do you say to this rather candid assertion?
This is a series of common comments from individuals that are pro-industry. They are probably molecular biologists or training in genetics and have very little, if any, grounded experiences in the real world of environmental microbiology, experiences in ecology and ecological principles, and so on. But in approaching my answers to this entire series of statements, I don't want to lose fact of the issues, and there are multiple, that I have with regards to genetic engineering in crops is primarily on the side of the management of these crops once they're put out into the environment. Mm-hmm. And we can talk till the cows come home all day, all night about the philosophy and usefulness and sophistication involved in genetic engineering. Mm-hmm. But the bottom lines for that technology that we need to remember, genes are being recombined, that's why they call it recombinant DNA technology, from or involving organisms that are very distantly related. Never happens by natural means, therefore it's unnatural genetic manipulation. It involves asexual reproduction, if you will, to create the new hybrid DNA molecules, as opposed to natural phenomena that have evolved naturally on the planet Earth over the eons of time. Processes that involve sexual reproduction, processes that, in other words, are natural. So I'm not anti-biotechnology. I'm certainly not someone who's anti-science. I love science. That's my life's work. Don't get me wrong. But the precision by which molecular biologists can now sequence a gene or even components of a gene to make the creation of unnatural recombined organisms, as Dr. Miller is referring to, the knowledge to do this sequencing and the details are very good, are very sophisticated. But let's not lose sight of the fact that there are other moving parts in this technology and its environmental applications that are of more concern to most scientists like myself. Not so much as to whether we know exactly the sequence of bases that have been taken, let's say, from a fish in the Arctic and genetically engineered into a tomato to make it have a longer shelf life or resist freezing. Yeah, those molecular biological techniques have grown in sophistication over the years. That's not the arguable case in my estimation. The arguable case might involve, for example, the introduction of chemical industries into the crucial components of the world food supply. We have chemical corporations that, you know, we don't have to remind each other. These are the guys and gals that made Agent Orange, DDT, PCBs, bovine growth hormone as a recombinant molecule, etc., over the time. Now they're into our food supply, specifically modifying and using seeds as the vehicle to sell their chemicals. That's the important part. Not so much the precision or lack thereof in the unnatural creation of these entities in a laboratory. Grant them that. They're precise. That's good. I'm glad to hear that. The bottom line is, as I said, let's take a look at what goes on out in the world when these unnatural entities are put into a management scenario. Those represent, the management scenarios represent some of my concerns. For example, it's hard to find anything other than a blue or a pink corn seed these days. Blue and pink. When you and I were growing up and where we're used to seeing corn, they're yellow. Well, those corn seeds are not yellow anymore. They're blue or pink. And why is that? Well, I thought you would never ask, Jesse. The reason why they're blue or pink is because our government has asked the seed manufacturers to use that as a sounding board, a signal to children and to parents that there's something different about these pink and blue seeds. Something different, that they're genetically engineered to produce in every cell inside that seed and every cell inside that plant a toxin that's come from the soil bacteria to get rid of insects. Not enough, but in addition to that, those seeds, when they're germinated, resist the application doses of chemicals. And today, we have Roundup. The active ingredient in that herbicide is called glyphosate. So when that corn germinates, you can spray that corn plant, get rid of the weeds around it most of the time, and the plant keeps smiling. The corn plant keeps smiling. But wait a minute, there's more, Jesse. Outside that seed, there's at least 4 toxic chemicals, neurotoxins, where Dr. Liu at Harvard University just a few weeks back said, these are the new DDTs of our time. These neurotoxins are there to control rootworm and other insect pests that will grow on the plant. And like I said, there's 4. Oh, and there's a fungicide or 2. So what am I getting at? Remember, it's chemical corporations that have inserted themselves into the seeds that are produced for our crops. And I'm worried about a conflict of interest in those chemical corporations because they have no incentive whatsoever to back off from using newer and more powerful and more potent and larger numbers of chemicals. What incentive? They have no incentive. They delete chemical 1, down goes the profits. But if they can tell you, well, if you got a weed resistant problem with Roundup, spray a little more often. And what really is clever, is very clever. A few years back, if you're growing a crop like soybeans, for example, you don't have to wait for that field to desiccate or to die back, because that takes several weeks. You can go in with a mountain load of Roundup and just spray the holy heck out of that field and kill your Roundup resistant soy, and in synchronous fashion you can harvest that whole field in a week. And that sounds good on paper, doesn't it? Yeah. It also sounds good for profits for the chemical companies that have inserted themselves into the supply of seeds that produces the crops that we eat. What do you suppose happens to all of those chemicals that we apply out in nature? The Roundup, the 4 neurotoxins, the fungicide. Oh, did I mention that our government is within perhaps a week or 2 away from approving crops that are resistant to new chemicals, such as, remember 2,4-D? Yeah. No, that was one of the ingredients that was used in the Vietnam War in Agent Orange, along with 2,4,5-T. So now, 2,4-D is going to be sprayed in addition to Roundup directly right on our corn, right on our soybeans. And scientists in Europe, not the United States, but scientists in Europe have recently published a report that shows there is significant accumulation of the active ingredient in Roundup on soybeans. Not soybeans grown in Europe, but soybeans grown in Ohio, in the United States. And they showed pretty big concentrations, 3 to 8 parts per million. That's something you can ingest every day. Yeah, we do also. Now, scientists in the mainstream, including one scientist who's a member of the American National Academy of Sciences, is predicting that when 2,4-D comes on, its use will increase just like Roundup did. We have seen during the Roundup Ready crop era of the last 17 years about a 1,100% increase in the herbicide use of Roundup. And they're predicting 300, 400, 500, up to 700-fold increase in the use of 2,4-D. And the chemical manufacturers tell us 2,4-D is nothing to worry about because there was a often contaminant, another contaminating chemical associated with 2,4-D that was produced during the Vietnam War era. A chemical that's called dioxin, which is probably one of the most serious and deadly chemicals known to humans. And the industry says they now have that problem licked. No more dioxin contamination. That's what they tell our regulators. But other reports tend to disagree with that. Depending on where the 2,4-D is going to come from, our regulators don't determine that, of course. That's up to business. And of course, being a businessman, you know that they're going to go after the cheapest stuff they can find on the world market. That's okay. Which means they'll be importing 2,4-D from China.
From China.
That is loaded with dioxin. And I have tried through comments on the appropriate USDA website to ask our regulators, to ask or require of industry to do some routine chemical analyses on each major batch of 2,4-D to see if there's a dioxin contaminant.
That seems like a reasonable request.
It's not going to happen. The other thing that I asked was, where's the toxicology data for what will become the simultaneous exposure in our food supply of glyphosate plus 2,4-D and maybe a third herbicide called glufosinate. Sounds like glyphosate, but they're all three very different chemicals. We don't know what happens to animals when all of that gets combined. And neither do our regulators. And why not? This is not rocket science. This is routine toxicology science that can and should be done. I asked, why aren't you requiring this? And you know, the faith of our regulatory agencies could so easily be restored in the American public because this 2,4-D's decision is precedent setting because that will provide industry the bridge to bring in other chemical requests for other chemical approvals. Let's do this first one really, really, really right. And tell the American people, if you are going to allow this product to come to market, as seems to be the case, tell us, no, reassure us that this is a safety decision, that this is a good biological decision. Tell us how you're going to determine that there's no dioxin in the 2,4-D. Tell us how you will know that the simultaneous presence of 2 or 3 herbicides in our food that will be safe. Tell us that since we now know from industry propaganda that it's been proven wrong, the glyphosate that has been used, glyphosate active ingredient in Roundup, that's been used for 17 years, that is supposed to, according to industry, rapidly become biodegraded, dissipate in the environment. Tell us why it's in our air. Tell us why it's in our water. Tell us why it's in our food. And tell us why Americans are excreting glyphosate in our urine. Industry many years ago said this is not going to happen. It's rapidly diluted, broken down into the environment. Oh, and while they're at it, they need to tell us why. It's true, it's only 10 women that were assayed. 30%, 3 of the 10 women were excreting glyphosate in their breast milk. How does that happen? Where does that come from? And I know a lady that was included in part of the assay for the urine sample, and she kind of freaked out, just knowing that. She thought she ate healthy, but I guess not. So coming back to Mr. Miller's comments and kind of trying to summarize where we are, I respect the molecular biological comments. I think they're accurate. We do know with great precision about the sequences in the DNA molecules that we shoot into individual plant cells to genetically engineer them. We do know the sequences. We don't know much about where those genes go in the chromosomes of the plant, or we always have to investigate, test for consequences of those DNA insertions. But he's right. We know a lot about the process. But what do we know? Does the public know? What does Mr. Miller know about the environmental consequences and management of Roundup Ready crops? About the super weeds that have emerged from 17 years of repeated application of Roundup, bringing upon us what's called the herbicide or pesticide treadmill, because we'll go from one chemical to the next chemical to the next chemical. This is not sustainable. Mr. Miller says organic farming is not sustainable. No. Current management practices used in genetically engineered crops. That's what's not sustainable. And don't take my word for it. There is a report out in the last year written by, I think it's something like 60 scientists from around the world, published through one of the subdivisions of the United Nations, that specifically addresses the issue that modern agriculture, intensive agriculture, as the type practiced in the developed nations, and to quote with paraphrase, that is what is not sustainable. That is what is not sustainable. And to just a person with the stature of Dr. Miller, with the number of people that might be influenced by that article, you should at least explain the reasoning why he says organic farming is not sustainable. I didn't glean that from his article. I don't understand why someone would try to claim that, particularly someone with his education. There's something about this organic farming that perhaps he does not understand.
And also the other thing is true, that in my humble understanding, all of American agriculture, most of it, up through 1948, was all organic. There was no other possibility. Pesticides had not come online at that time. So humankind, through all of the millennia of our existence here, have farmed, whether they knew it or not, organically. There was no other possibility.
I don't know the year, Jesse, and that may be arguable from those that do know the year. But basically, what you said is right on target. Is very true. But again, that's history, and most people don't waste their time, unfortunately, in looking back to see where we came from. And that's a shame, because we can always learn something from the past.
There are other approaches. I'd like to tell a story about Burbank, the great plant biologist. Luther Burbank at his experimental gardens in Santa Rosa, which is right there in the Bay Area, where we are. They say when he was developing the Shasta daisy, for example, he walked right down the rows of daisies. He walked right down the rows without looking, just looking straight ahead, and he would select this daisy and that daisy, this one and that, and that's how he can. So let's agree this is a very, very different approach coming from a rather different mindset and a different universe of being and of understanding. So the world is rich, and the world is rich and strange, and let's just go with this. This is a very, very narrow, very, very focused, and very, very deeply estranged and alienated point of view that we are seeing here, and let us agree, and there's no question about this, that if this human race is going to get onto it, the very reverse of what he's saying is going to become true, that the only direction of American agriculture, of world agriculture, is through biological, through organic, and through biodynamic means. There's no other possibility as far as I can see.
I have not met this man. His name is David Brenner. I only know him from blogs and other articles, similar articles on the internet. But David Brenner is a 35-year farmer in Ohio. He farms about 1,200 acres, more or less, and he grows corn, soy, wheat, and hops on a commercial scale. And he was recognized, I believe about 2 years ago now, as the Ohio Agricultural Farmer of the Year. And Oregonians will have a feel for the relevance and importance of an agricultural state like Ohio for one farmer to have been selected to receive that prestigious recognition. And what Dave has done is reached out to the larger community and the closer community where he lives to educate other farmers about his style, about David Brand's style of farming. And he uses what I will call as a biological, sustainable type of farming. Basically, what he does, through the years, he has experimented with various kinds of cover crops. And apparently, from what I have read, and it's unbelievable, that only of the order of 1% of the American farmers practice the use of cover crops. And what that does for Dave is he, over the years, has seen significant increases in the organic content of his soil. By using cover crops, special cover crops that grow well in his area, such as legumes that have biological nitrogen fixation occurring in the roots. He's been able to sustain the nitrogen fertilization level in his soil, and as I said, increase the organic content. He suppresses weeds. He uses less fertilizer, but one of my most important things that I want to share, he has not walked away entirely from the petrochemical industry. He just says, I only use it when I have to in the smallest amounts possible. And he has sustained his yields. He is an excellent farmer from everything that I can see and read. And he delights himself in teaching his techniques to the younger generations.
So good. I'm
Beautiful, beautiful man.
Well, that reassures me.
Me too.
That reassures me. I feel, especially being here on this visit here to Ashland, I feel the tremendous power and vitality here at the grassroots level. That will sustain. One of the mightiest thinkers of all time said that mankind never sets itself a problem that it cannot solve. And let's carry that away. Let's carry that thought away with us. And I want to thank you, Ray, for a delightful talk. You've enlightened us all in many directions. And I was wondering if you could say a few words to sort of summarize the basic theme that you're presenting.
Well, we covered a lot of territory, but there is one thing that I cannot and should not and will not forget. We talked about a variety of scary chemicals in our food system. And I want to go on this record as acknowledging the information that we do need to change that part about our society. And that is one of increasing the information flow to those in our society that may want to know a little bit more about what they're eating. And as you know, Oregon is at the front end of a campaign involving what's called Measure 92, the Right to Know campaign, to require labels where they currently exist, only where they currently exist, labels on our foods when they contain genetically engineered materials. In that way, those who care about what it is that they are eating and maybe have special nutritional needs, maybe have some special worries because of an illness about the kinds of chemicals that they want to keep away from their bodies, have infant children or grandchildren and they don't want them to be exposed, they'll at least have a little bit of knowledge like 2/3 of the rest of the world does, by seeing the label and say, no, I want to wait till this baby gets a little older before I expose him or her to this. So today I will elect to go somewhere else or to buy differently in my foods. And it is a right to know, and I look forward to seeing the day when that measure passes big in Oregon, in the same way that the local measures in Jackson County and Josephine County did this last spring. And I am very positive, very optimistic about the oncoming change in how our foods are managed and produced in the United States. There's just so many things going on, both at the retail and manufacturing level and at the grassroots level throughout the United States. Things are going to get it better.
I'm convinced of it. Kellogg's Corn Flakes put on the front of their package GMO free. And now in the trade literature that I see, it tells me that manufacturers are scrambling for GMO-free ingredients. They have to have it. In other words, laws and legislatures are one thing, but the power of the market is insuperable. And that's the language that they understand, and it is a happening. It is a happening.
Yes, I fully agree. In another dimension, if you will allow me, that is so good, that feels so right, because the power of the people and the push and pull of the economy expressed by our citizens. That's the American way. We sometimes seem to have forgotten that in recent years. But yes, wow. I hear what you're saying, and I agree 100%.
Abraham Lincoln said, "What better or equal hope do we have in the world?" Thank you, Ray, so much for a magnificent and enlightening talk. You have planted so many seeds. You have given us so many things to ponder and to think about. Thank you indeed. It's been a privilege and an honor to speak with you.
And me too. Thank you, Jesse.